Series. And if you missed the first two, you can look on our YouTube channel to see the first two. The first one we talked about having the faith of a mustard seed, and we let you know that you have enough, that you don't need God to give you any more faith than you already have, that you already have enough. And then last week we talked about getting grounded, about how we are connected to one another, both individually and collectively as a church. And so today we want to talk about getting ready for transformation. And allow me to begin by saying that transformation is a concept that we talk about in multiple ways in the life of the church. We talk about transformation often through the salvation process. My aunt used to say, and I didn't understand it when I was younger, but I have a better understanding of what she was saying now. She would often use this phrase. She would say that when she met Jesus, she had an experience where she looked at her hands and her hands looked new. She looked at her feet and her feet did too. And I kept looking at my hands and looking at my feet for something to change, and nothing did change about them except for they kept growing as I got older. And so I did not understand what she was saying for a while, but eventually I came to understood that what she was talking about was a metaphor. It was a way of saying that there was a change that happened that was as tangible to her. It felt as real to her as if something had physically changed about her. It's one of the ways that we talk about transformation. We talk about transformation in terms of what happens in our minds or in our hearts, how God can come into our mind and heart and change what is happening inside of us and provide strength where we did not feel it before, or peace where we did not feel it before, or love where we felt its absence before, or joy where there was only sadness before. These are ways of talking about transformation. Transformation at its root, friends and family, is just a deep fundamental change that happens inside of us, through us, around us. And change is often a difficult concept. Change is not something that is easy to talk about, nor is it something that it is always easy to experience. In fact, oftentimes we feel within ourselves a resistance to change, especially when we have become comfortable with the way things are. If you do not understand what I'm saying, then maybe I can bring your attention back to a few years ago, before the election in 2016, back when it was 2015, and we had a president in the White House that we could be proud of. A president in the White House who spoke eloquently, a president in the White House who could form complete sentences of rational thought, a president in the White House who we knew was one of the smartest people in the room whenever he walked into the room, a president in the White House who could do all of that and somehow manage on occasion to be cool as a fan while doing it, a president who people looked at and looked up to. Who other leaders of the world looked to and were impressed by his leadership. A president who, even when making difficult decisions, was able to talk about them with the complexity and nuance that was needed and that honored the decisions that were in front of him. We had a president that even when we didn't agree with, we could respect the way he approached problems. A president whose opposition, we saw how ridiculous they were by opposing who he was, because they could not oppose what he said or how he carried himself. A president whose biggest quote-unquote scandal was wearing a tan suit at a press conference, which looked sharp as a tack, by the way. This was the president we had, and because of our electoral process, which says that a president can only serve 8 years, that president had to change. And so if you remember what it felt like on the day we found out who would succeed our president of the United States, who would replace 44 and become the 45th president of the United States. If you remember that anxiety that you may have felt, or the sickening in the pit of your stomach, when you imagined what was going to happen when the person who had spent the entire election campaign dividing the nation, calling people names, acting in every way unpresidential, was going to achieve the highest office in the land, then maybe you have a sense of what it feels like to undergo change and feel uncomfortable with the change that happens. My brothers and sisters, that there are times that change feels uncomfortable, unsettling. We are uncertain about what's going to happen. There is a phrase that is often used in politics, but applies elsewhere in our lives, that says, better the devil we know than the devil we don't. And what that statement gets to is how resistant we are to change, even when we are in a situation that seems like it's not the best. Sometimes it feels like sticking in a not so great situation is better than changing to something different. My brothers and sisters, change can create anxiety, it can create worry within us, my brothers and sisters. But the truth is that growth requires change. That we cannot grow if we do not change. And so we've said in this Mustard Seed series that we were going to take a practice from that great theologian Howard Thurman and practice a little Christian mysticism, which simply means we will look at how God is at work through nature to understand how God may be at work through us. And so if you understand what happens with the mustard seed, that in order for the mustard seed to achieve its full potential, the seed has to change. It cannot grow if it does not change. In fact, if you look at the seed, there is nothing in the physical nature of the seed that gives you a preview of what it will look like when it is fully grown. If I can make this point a little clearer, an apple seed does not look like a miniature apple, nor does it look like a miniature apple tree. And so if you look at the apple seed, there is nothing about the physical makeup of the seed that tells you what it will look like once it is fully grown. My brothers and sisters, in fact, the only reason that we know what seeds will become once we put them in the ground is because we have the accumulated history of human knowledge of people who have grown plants and know what will happen at the end of the growth process. My brothers and sisters. And so it is that accumulated history that teaches us what will happen once the seed is planted in the ground. It is not any knowledge that we can gather by looking at the seed itself, my brothers and sisters. Now, the challenge is, while we can do this with seeds, that there is not enough human history possible to be able to know what people will grow into when given the opportunity, to know what people's potential will be, my brothers and sisters. In order to understand that, you would have to have an eternal view to be able to know what those possibilities are, which is why God knows what we have the potential to be. God knows who we have the potential to become, but we cannot know that because we don't have the breadth of knowledge that God has, my brothers and sisters. It's why the prophet says that as high as the heaven is above the earth, so high are God's ways above our ways and God's thoughts above our thoughts. That God can see who it is that we have the potential to be and become, but we cannot see that. We cannot look at one another or look at somebody and know who they will be just by looking at them. This is why, my brothers and sisters, that racial profiling is such a heartbreaking experience. Not just because it happens to people who look like us, to people who have been so wonderfully and beautifully kissed by God's own Son, by people whose Nubian skin, my brothers and sisters, is a wonder for the world to see and witness and behold. And that beautiful wonder is made an element of shame because of the way that people are treated, my brothers and sisters. It's not just that, but it's because people think that they can assume by looking at somebody who they are or who they have the potential to be, and they treat them, or more to the point, mistreat them based on false perceptions, my brothers and sisters. But there is no way you can look at somebody and know who they have the potential to be. My brothers and sisters, there's no way we can look at somebody by physical appearance and know who they have the potential to be. Not only that, there's no way we can look at somebody by an action that they engage in any moment of their lives and know who they have the potential to be. If you don't believe me, my brothers and sisters, all you have to do is take a look at snapshots in the Bible, and you will see that biblical characters far exceed what it looks like is possible based on a snapshot of their lives. For instance, if we had looked at Gideon, at the snapshot of his life, when the army is invading his nation and he is hiding in a wine press, we would never think that he had the potential to lead his people in successful revolt against those who tried to oppress him. If we looked at Moses and we saw the snapshot of his life when he lost his temper and killed somebody, when he had the means, because he was the adopted son of Pharaoh, to bring down legal justice on what happened, we never would have seen that he was somebody who had the potential to lead a strategic political movement. If we looked, my brothers and sisters, at people at any snapshot of their lives, we would never know who they had the potential to be. If you looked at who Noah was on the day after the floods receded, when Noah was drunk in his own tent, so drunk that he could not make his way to his own bed, and his sons and grandsons had to help him, you would not know that he was somebody who saved the world from destruction. Any snapshot of a moment of their lives, if you looked at Peter, when he took his sword and cut off the servant's ear of a soldier, not a soldier himself, but the ear of a servant of a soldier, you would never know that he would become one of the greatest preachers in biblical history. If we looked at you or I in particular moments of our lives, we would never know that we would be the people who we are right now, my brothers and sisters. But I thank God that God does not judge us based on the worst moments of our lives. I thank God that God does not judge us based on mistakes we have made or decisions that we have engaged in. I thank God that God's love for us is not based on how we perform in any given moment of our lives, but God sees beyond that, and God sees who we are and who we have the potential to be. And God's love for us reaches past any mistakes that we may make or anything that we may have done and calls us to our best selves at all times. I thank God that God is able to see us for who we are and love us, my brothers and sisters. I thank God that God's love is able to reach down and grab us and hold us close, even when we feel like letting go.
That's right.
We all have the potential to change, to grow, my brothers and sisters. And we cannot tell by looking at something at any given moment what it will be. But in order to transform, in order to engage in transformation, there are things that have to happen, my brothers and sisters, and I want to lift these up. First thing is that in order to grow and to be transformed, seeds have to be in the right soil. Seeds have to be in the right soil. If you don't believe me, my brothers and sisters, I challenge you to go find the best, most delicious orange you can find, and to take the seeds out of that orange, and to dig a hole deep in the ground, and to till that soil so it's good and tender, to water it, and try to plant an orange tree here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And you will find, my brothers and sisters, that no matter how much you try, no matter how much love or attention you give to it, that you cannot grow an orange tree here in Cincinnati, Ohio, because the weather conditions, the conditions of the climate, the way that the climate impacts the soil in Cincinnati is not conducive to growing orange trees. In the same way, my brothers and sisters, it's why the best and most delicious apples come from that great state up north, that state of Michigan, my brothers and sisters, and they don't grow apples down in Florida or Texas because you need the ground to be in a certain way in order to be able to grow apples, my brothers and sisters. And what I'm trying to say is that the environment around the seed dictates what kind of seed can grow in that place. It's why, my brothers and sisters, it's why educational activists are so on fire about trying to reform our public school system in the way that it nurtures and educates particularly young black kids, because the way that our public school system has been historically set up ignores what is necessary to help black kids to grow to their full potential. And that people who have grown through that system has often grown in spite of what has been around them, in spite of the climate around them. They have been, as Tupac Shakur, that great theologian, once said, they've been the rose that has grown through concrete, my brothers and sisters. And it has not been because the environment has been nurturing, but it's been because of the sure, dogged will to grow and to be something and to make something of themselves, despite of what has happened around them. But how much more powerful would it be? How much better would it be if we could create systems that work together, that conspire together for our children's success rather than their failure? How much more wonderful would the world be, my brothers and sisters, if we made it that you had to go out of your way, you had to be determined in order to fail, because every system around you was designed to remind you of the greatness that was inside of you. Every system around you was designed to inspire you to be the best you could be. Every system around you was designed to call the best out of you. What would it look like if we could create systems that were designed to bring the best out of people instead of systems that were designed to trap people in their worst moments and make those worst moments as if their entire legacy must be defined by those moments? What if instead of creating a school to prison pipeline, we created a school to business pipeline, or a school to trade pipeline, a school to success pipeline, where we look at students in the third grade, and instead of seeing how many prison cells we need to build in order to house people by reading scores, we would see how many therapists do we need to bring into schools to help students to achieve their full potential. What if we created systems that were designed to bring the best out of people? My brothers and sisters, seeds need to be in the right soil, and when they are placed in the right soil, then amazing things can happen, my brothers and sisters. This is not only true for our school systems, but it is also true for our churches. My brothers and sisters, that the churches need to be the right soil, that we cannot expect growth and transformation to happen if we are not creating the atmosphere that is right for growth. If people have to come to the church and fight in order to be seen as fully human, then growth cannot happen in the church, my brothers and sisters. If people have to come to the church and fight in order to be valued, growth cannot happen in the church. And some of the reasons why we have seen such a lack of growth in churches across the board is because we have not created the conditions that are right for growth in the churches.
Amen.
And my brothers and sisters, this is not a fault or failure of any individual church or any individual leader, but it is a collective fault and failure that we have failed to adapt with the times, that we have failed to understand that as times change, my brothers and sisters, that God may not change, but we need to change. Because God does not have to change, because God has all knowledge. However, we do not have all knowledge. No matter how many times you read the 23rd Psalm or sing Amazing Grace, my brothers and sisters, that we do not have the mind of God, which means we need to be ready to change. And understanding that as we change, my brothers and sisters, we are not changing away from God, but we are changing to a deeper understanding of who God is.
Amen.
That the way that our grandparents understood God was important and necessary for their survival, for their liberation, for what God was doing in their time, but that the way we understand God is not going to be the same way that our grandparents understand God. The way we do church should not be the same way that our grandparents did church. Not because God is different, but because what is happening to us is different. Brothers and sisters. So the seeds need to be in the right soil. We need to ask ourselves constantly, how are we being the right soil? The second thing, my brothers and sisters, I want to say about transformation is that transformation happens when we are able and willing to let out of us what we so often hold inside of us. The seed cannot engage in transformation, my brothers and sisters, as long as all of the amino acids, all of the proteins, all of the carbohydrates, all of the root systems that are planted inside the seed stay in the seed. No matter how much you put it in the ground, or how much you water the ground, or how much you take care of it, if the seed were able to hold everything inside of itself, it would never develop into being the plant. It would never realize its full potential, my brothers and sisters. But in order for it to experience the growth and transformation, what is on the inside of the seed has to be let out of the seed. And my brothers and sisters, I know this is a challenge because particularly in the Black communities, there has been a culture of silence about things that are the deepest and the most impactful to us. We have lived under an assumed don't ask and don't tell mentality about some of the things that are most important to us, sometimes because of precept, sometimes because somebody has taught us that this is the way we ought to act. But sometimes because of example. Sometimes because this is how the adults in our lives treated us. That they did not talk about the things that were most impactful or most important to them, our brothers and sisters. I experienced this in my own life when in my early 20s, I learned more about my parents after their death than I did about them when they were alive. Because stories that they did not tell, things that were not told, experiences of how they engaged with family, they held to themselves. And so in an attempt to, in their minds, shield me from things, they did not share with me these stories that I heard about them after they passed by other family members who helped me to gain insight, not just about who they were, but helped me to understand better who I was. And so often, my brothers and sisters, the things that are inside of us, experiences that we've had, lessons that we've learned, the high cost that the lessons have been for us personally, we are reluctant to share, my brothers and sisters, because we have grown up in a culture that has said that we ought not share those things. And the cost is, my brothers and sisters, not only are there people around us who will not benefit from the experiences that we have had, that we hold inside of us, but also we cannot be fully changed. We cannot be transformed as long as we are holding on to these things inside of us.
Yes, preach.
My brothers and sisters, just as a closed fist cannot receive anything, so when we hold on to what is inside of us, it limits God's ability to move within us, not because God can't force God's way in, but because God won't force God's way in. Because God will only work within us to the extent that we allow God, that we open ourselves up to God, my brothers and sisters. And when we hold ourselves close, when we refuse to share what is happening inside of us, when we have questions that we do not ask, when we have doubts that we will not raise, when we are wondering where God is and we will not say it, when we put a plastic smile on our face because we think everybody expects us to be happy because we are saved, instead of sometimes wearing the face that is authentic to us and saying, I might be struggling, but I'm here anyway. When we do those things, my brothers and sisters, we do not allow God to come in and do the transformation that's happening inside of us.
Yes.
My brothers and sisters, I want you to know that God is able to handle anything that is happening inside of you. My brothers and sisters, that God does not cast us out because of what's happening inside of us. In fact, the reason that God is able to handle it is because God already knows that it's happening. You're not keeping it a secret from God. You're just holding it inside yourself. And so as we open ourselves up, my brothers and sisters, then we open ourselves up for transformation. But not only does transformation happen when we are able and willing to let out what we are keeping inside of us, but transformation also happens when we are willing and able to let newness inside of us. My brothers and sisters, the seed does not simply let out what is inside of it into the ground to grow, but the seed has to draw nutrients from the ground into itself. It has to draw water from the ground into itself. It has to draw the strength and the energy, the light from the sun into itself. It has to draw from the environment around it in order to grow, my brothers and sisters. And so often we think about Christianity as being a one-way exchange. That we are going in to change someone or to transform someone or to impact someone else, my brothers and sisters, as if we have all knowledge and the people that we are going to are in need of what we have. But, my brothers and sisters, Christianity is not designed to be a one-way exchange, but to be a mutual exchange. That as we share, we also take in what is happening, because as we take in, we find the strength that we need all around us to help us to grow. You'd be surprised the places where God can speak a word to you. You'd be surprised who or what God can use to encourage you, my brothers and sisters. If Balaam can get a lesson from God through the donkey that Balaam was riding, my brothers and sisters, what makes you think that God can't speak to you through the people in your life? What makes you think, my brothers and sisters, that just because somebody's current life situation doesn't look the best and you can't learn from them? What makes you think that the person on the street who looks homeless doesn't have a lesson that can encourage you? What makes you think that the person that's a wino does not have a testimony that can strengthen your faith? What makes you think that God can't use somebody else to impact you? My brothers and sisters, transformation happens when we are open to how God is moving all around us. And so, my brothers and sisters, is why we engage in the practice of response to the word and the sacred conversations that we have after the sermon, because it is an opportunity for us to open what is inside of us and to be open to what God may be saying or doing all around us. Now, don't get me wrong, my brothers and sisters. I know that this process is not as easy as just preaching it. I know that there are real fears and concerns about being open to transformation, especially in this day and in this time. My brothers and sisters, it makes sense to me every time I turn on the news and I see people who are supposed to be leading our country worrying more about trying to look smart or look like they are telling the truth than actually getting to the real truth of the matter, then I understand why there's concern to be open to transformation. When I look at what's happening in the world around us, my brothers and sisters, and I see that despite multiple testimonies that the President of these United States has engaged in illegal and unconstitutional activity during his tenure as president, but yet the party system around him refuses to acknowledge the truth of what members of their own party are saying about this president, but are simply trying to lie or obfuscate or change the subject because they are more scared of losing power than they are of upholding what is true and what is right. I understand why there's reason to be afraid of transformation. My brothers and sisters, when I see how welcoming strangers in has become a risky task, and how some people, when they have welcomed strangers into their midst, have unknowingly welcomed in somebody who has tried to do them harm. Somebody who has taken multiple lives. Somebody who has done physical or mental or psychological harm, my brothers and sisters, I understand why it is easy to resist change and transformation. But can I give you a reason why we ought to do it? If I were an old school Baptist preacher, I would just tell you ought to do it because God said do it. I would tell you ought to do it because Paul said in Romans chapter 12 that you ought to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I would just trust that the fact that God said do it or that Paul said do it should be enough, brothers and sisters. But I want to give you some encouragement to help you understand why it is even in your best interest to do it, my brothers and sisters, because God doesn't say do it and Paul doesn't say do it just so you will obey their commands, but God says do it and Paul says do it because both God and Paul know that the best part of life is on the other side of transformation. If you don't believe me, my brothers and sisters, you can imagine what happened with Paul and his transformation that began when he was on the Damascus Road, when he was going to persecute people who were following Christ, was transformed, realized that the people he was going to persecute was actually the people God was calling him to be around, to learn from, so that he could be the biggest advocate for, my brothers and sisters. God changes Paul's entire disposition, and it is on the other side of that transformation that Paul experiences joy like he never experienced before. How do I know? Because it's after transformation that Paul says you can count it all joy whenever you are going through various trials, because the trials that happen are just invitations for God to come in and show up in magnificent ways in your life. And so that no matter what happens, that this joy that I have cannot be taken from me. Paul experiences that joy on the other side of that transformation. Paul knows that the joy in life, my brothers and sisters, on the other side of transformation is greater than the joy on this side. Not only that, my brothers and sisters, but Paul may have experienced some peace on the front side of transformation, but it isn't until he gets to the other side of transformation that he says the peace that passes all understanding can keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus, which means even when all the evidence in front of me says I ought to be losing my mind, even when all the evidence in front of me says I got to throw my hands up in the air and surrender, even when all the evidence in front of me ought to keep me awake, pacing the floor all night long, wondering what's going to happen, there is a sense of peace that keeps me still, that lets me know that God is working even when I can't see God working. There is peace that happens on the other side of transformation. Not only is there joy and is there peace, my brothers and sisters, but Paul may have experienced love. He may have experienced love on the front side of transformation, but it's on the other side that Paul writes the most magnificent telling that we have about love in the biblical text. It's on the other side of transformation that Paul says love is patient, love is kind, that love is not easily provoked. It's on the other side of transformation that Paul says, now abide these things, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. It's because Paul knows that the greatest love of all is not in a Whitney Houston song, but it's on what happens on the other side of transformation, my brothers and sisters. And so I want to say, if you need more peace in your life, if you need more joy in your life, if you need more love in your life, won't you come and go with me to the other side of transformation? Because the journey, my brothers and sisters, as we engage in this journey of transformation, God has peace and joy and love like you will never know. If we can take steps to make sure that our environment, that this soil is good and nurturing soil. Yes. If we can be willing to let out what we are holding inside of us. If we are willing and able to let newness into us, then what happens on the other side, my brothers and sisters, is greater than we can imagine. There's a practice that we have that we call responsibility. Word. And it's our way of acknowledging that God doesn't just speak to me